Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. And Laura, we've got another great guest who also joined us on our Reimagining Retirement event. Do you want to do the honors?
Sure, I'd love to. So, as Paul mentioned, you might recognize a familiar face or a familiar voice from the Reimagining Retirement Forum series, specifically Forum 3, where we talked about getting seniors to know, like, and trust us in a virtual world. So, excited to dig deeper into that. And in our virtual studio with us today, we have Rhian Horgan, founder and CEO of Silvur. So, love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the company, and what got you to today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Paul and Laura, for having me here today. So, Silver is an app that's dedicated to helping baby boomers navigate retirement. So, our average customer is 58 years old. They're typically a few years away from retirement. And kind of the inspiration for building the company was really helping my own parents navigate retirement and seeing how complicated it was to put together all the pieces of retirement. I think at times many of us can think, about retirement is about being about that, that 401k, that savings plan. And what we see is that retirement is about so much more than how you're invested. It's about how you think about electing Social Security, how you plan for your healthcare costs, how you create that retirement paycheck. And today, what you see is the consumer is actually making a lot of those decisions themselves. So, our goal with the app Silver is to really give this customer confidence and peace of mind as they put that retirement plan in place.
And maybe just tell us a little bit about what's the backstory of building this, Rena? How did you lock onto this as a problem to solve?
Yeah, so I had worked at JP Morgan Chase in asset management for about 17 years. I was a managing director there. And I think because I had worked in financial services for so long, I became that trusted child who my parents started asking questions to about retirement. And for, I would say, most of the last decade, the conversation was about when my parents were going to retire. And then a few years ago, the conversation shifted from when to how. I'm just looking over here. I always say that like the real inspiration though came when I found myself at Barnes and Noble buying this 300 plus page book on Social Security, and having myself, had an account at Betterment and an account at Acorns and Mint, like seeing the technology that I was using, I just felt like I was going like back in time to have to go to Barnes and Noble. And then the fact that it was like 300 pages to unpack Social Security, it was just this moment where it became really obvious to me that we weren't setting the average consumer up for success. But as I looked out in the space, there was this perception that if you were over the age of 50, that you were old, dying, in decline, and that you didn't know how to use technology. And I guess I had a little more faith than that. My father is a retired pediatric radiologist, and I remember getting a computer in the 80s, an Apple II GS. My dad used to read CAT scans and MRIs on the computer at home. It was dial up, but like, he knows how to use technology. He just uses it differently than a millennial. And I think if you take some time to think about the fact that we have this like amazing tech stack that has been built to empower consumers to make financial decisions, but the vast majority of that tech stack today is addressing the problem around accumulation. What my father and his generation was facing was this, next stage of life, which was decumulation. But the good news is, just like Plaid can help you with accumulation, it can help you with decumulation. So there was this, there is tech available, but no one was really focused on the problem. And I think for me, just inspired by my parents, I got to work.
You mentioned the tech and Barnes and Noble going back in
Mhm.
time. As an avid reader, I kind of laugh at that because you can't really find Barnes and Nobles anymore. But in thinking about designing for boomers and millennials, you mentioned the tech stack and this notion that boomers, they're old, they don't know how to use technology, or I'm sorry, retirees, they're older, they don't know how to use technology. But we know that that's not the current reality. So what is designing like? Like how is it different for those two audiences versus say the younger millennials versus our current baby boomers as we know
Yeah.
them?
So we've spent a tremendous amount of time doing user research. So the third full-time employee we had at the company was a UX designer, and that person's specialty is both doing research and surveys to really understand what our customers' needs are, but then also applying that to how the product is built. And in particular, with a digital product, actually building screens that they will feel really comfortable with. So a couple things that we see with baby boomers that are very different than what you'd see with a millennial. Um, The first is that this consumer is really willing to spend a lot more time with us in that first session than the average millennial will. And in fact, it's meant that over time, we've actually made our onboarding process actually longer rather than shorter. So with an app that's dedicated to millennials, typically you have like 2 or 3 screens, you connect your accounts with Plaid and you're like off to the races. Our customer has their money in like 8 or 10 different places. They've had lots of different jobs. They rarely connect with Plaid in their first onboarding with us. We allow them to do that, but most of them self add their own information. And because they know how complicated retirement is, they want to spend time in putting that information. And so, for example, we in our earliest version didn't ask customers whether they had a pension, and we had it deeper in the experience, but people didn't trust the output because we hadn't asked that question. And so the onboarding experience with our customers looks very different than millennials. I would say less obvious in the experience, but absolutely there is just thinking about the pattern around how you interact. And I guess I would say in its simplest format that the millennial generation is this like swipe left, swipe right, kind of figure it out generation. What we find is that our audience is very purposeful about what they touch on a screen. They don't want to make a mistake. There's the concept of being able to go backwards isn't the UX flow that they're used to. And so they want to be really sure before they press a button. And so really thinking about how you do your design around that. And then the last thing I would say is that this consumer is, and it kind of goes back to the onboarding, but again, we see it after onboarding, which is this consumer realizes how important these decisions are, and they're going to keep coming back and they want to do more research. So there is this view that like, no one's going to do this for me. Therefore, I need to go do my research. I'm going to start with Google, and I'm going to do a lot of online research, and then I'm going to talk to some friends. And then eventually I'll end up potentially with a human advisor or an insurance agent, depending on what the product is. But there is this multiple step process that I think looks really different to what you see with the average millennial.
So great. I downloaded your app. I spent a lot of time putting all my retirement plans in. I know my data, I know my number.
Yep.
Why do I come back? Why do I open that app the second, third, fourth, fifth time?
Yeah, so the first thing that we do is we give all of our customers a free retirement score. And the idea behind the score is it really addresses this customer's number one fear, which is running out of money in retirement. I'm sure there are lots of people on this phone who have built very sophisticated financial plans. And I think that the art in the science here is that we've built all the software. We have 3,000 data points that goes into this retirement score. But in its essence, the number we're giving is how long your savings are going to last. So Paul, your number might be 85. Laura, your number might be 90, and you're each going to have a reaction to whether you think that number is good enough. And so what the app really allows the customer to do is then think about it, is that number enough? And then how do I change that score? So that's the first thing we see is a lot of iterations around things. How might I optimize my plan to improve that score? The second thing that we see customers doing is a lot of research. And I think this is where, back to the 300-page book on Social Security, most people read more than one article on Social Security before they make their election. They probably read 8 to 10 articles. They probably play with a couple of calculators. They talk to a couple of friends, and then eventually they end up on the Social Security website. So what we see as the behavior in the app is this coming back to read content and get smart about the decisions, and then do a scenario analysis. So what if, look, I just lost my job this year. Okay, now that I've lost my job, if I don't think I can get permanent income and now I'm going to shift the plan to part-time, like what does that do to my score?
Now, where does the human element come in? Like, listen, I love to put all this information in. Oh, this is hard. Or I don't understand my score. I'd like to talk to somebody to help me figure out what's your philosophy or structure for giving me, human support during in its digital experience?
Yeah, so for the set of calculators that we've built a human support engine that's there really for technical, more like I'm having trouble with the app functioning questions, but we're not a financial advisor or RA, so we're not providing live advice to the consumers. What I would say is that if the consumer doesn't understand the score, then we haven't actually designed the page right. So one of the real beauties about actually saying that you're going to go 100% digital is that it really forces you to think about, like, have you described what they need to do on that page and what that number actually means? Well, I will tell you that the score lands extraordinarily well, and it is very obvious. And in fact, I think because we did it based on age, it made it really intuitive.
Yeah.
Before we launched, we did a lot of testing around like, should we align this to a FICO score or a 0 to 100? And age is just something that everyone really got. I do think, though, that this consumer over time will want to interact with a human on different things. So I think Medicare is a perfect example where the first conversation a 60-year-old has is not with an agent. And in fact, we've been told by our 60-year-old customers that if they do call an agent about a supplemental plan to understand it, that the agent tells them to call back when they're 64 and a half and doesn't want to spend time with them. And that's because that agent's job is to basically convert 64 and a half-year-olds into their first supplemental plan and like move them into the funnel. So what we see, and this is what our customer looks like, is that that customer is doing their research on, okay, well, what is a supplemental plan? How much does it cost? What are the decisions I need to make around it? And then who are the carriers? And then when they get to 64 and a half, they might be 100% confident and they just want to go through it all online, or they're going to pick up a phone at some point in the process. But I guess what I can't underestimate enough is how much research this customer is doing on their own. And what we're really trying to create is this ecosystem that allows them to do that.
Well, there's a reason that book you held up, Social Security, is that thick. These are hard, complicated decisions and sets of regulations to work through. So I'm not surprised, but I do love your thesis of design this thing so that I don't need a person. At least I don't need a person for a long way through the journey. Now, Marcus at Goldman proved that just focusing on a purely digital experience can attract what, $100 million in assets. I think 100 million in assets. I think they've maybe bigger than assets. I want to say 100 billion, but it's at least 100 million through Marcus. How does this? If I think of what Goldman did in Marcus and the audience they have focused on, how do you think about the retirement savings audience? Or are you targeting a niche part of the market with your current offer, or is this more mainstream America at this point?
Yeah. So the audience that we're really focused on is that top 30 or 40% of Americans, X the 1% that have saved something for retirement. So typically that customer has $250,000 to $750,000 in a retirement savings account. They have some home equity. They might have a partial pension. And what they're really trying to do is stay independent in retirement. And so the offering that we've put together is really intended to take that 30 to 40% of Americans and help them stay financially independent. We're just launching our financial wellness membership, which we're really excited about. And at the core of that membership is really about like, how do we empower that consumer to feel confident making these decisions? You mentioned a minute ago, kind of again, the Social Security book, and what we really think about is, what are the 10 things you really have to know about Social Security, give you confidence that, like, if you're divorced, you've read the divorce module. If you're married, you understand what marital benefits look like, help you understand that, but then actually give you the confidence to move forward and actually get you out of this kind of Dr. Google experience where you're kind of in this like never ending research. And what we get excited about with membership is that ability to both educate and empower the customer through our retirement school, but also allow them to continue to personalize their score. Having built this software, what I will tell you is there are a number of really important decisions this consumer will make that have nothing to do with investments that actually could be the biggest drivers of their retirement. Just to give you a couple examples, one is where you live. So I'm based in New York. High healthcare costs, high state taxes, and high cost of living. So intuitively, we all probably know that moving from New York to Florida is probably a good trade in retirement. But I can tell you that for our average customer, it adds 7 years onto their retirement score, that decision of moving from New York to Florida.
Okay, interesting. Why?
Because when they move to Florida, interestingly, their healthcare costs actually go up, but no state taxes and a much lower cost of living. The state taxes in particular for our customers come into play because when they're withdrawing money from their 401ks, they're paying federal and state taxes. And so when you start to have consumers that have a lot saved in their 401ks, which is what the profile of our customer looks like, that like question around like, what is that state level taxes becomes actually really important quickly.
Interesting.
So that's one example. Another example would be adding part-time work. We just did a survey last week of our customer base, and 2/3 said they either definitely plan to work part-time in retirement or are considering it. So 2/3, this idea of like going from full-time work to retiring is just like, that's last generation's retirement. This generation is going full-time to part-time and then fully retiring. Adding $1,000 a month of part-time income for 5 years. So let's say you retire at 62 to part-time work. You work, 5 to 10 hours a week for 5 years. You add $1,000 a month in retirement income. That adds 3 years to your score. So there's a lot of decisions this consumer can make that actually are in their control. Like I always think about like markets, not in my control, but where I live, I've got more control of whether I want to work part-time. I've got more control of how much I spend. I've got some control over. These are some of the really human decisions this customer can make that actually can have significant financial implications on their financial wellness.
So you mentioned the membership. So when you think of memberships in terms of retirement, there's one that comes to mind, 4 letters. I don't even think I need to say them. But what does a modern membership look like, and where did you get inspiration for it?
Yeah, so for us, what we get really excited about is serving this consumer who is in their 50s and 60s. So ARP, amazing company that was built for the silent generation. So I think about brands like ARP, Silver Sneakers, The Villages, all these like iconic companies that reimagined what retirement was like, but they reimagined retirement in the 1980s. And when we talk to our consumers today, they don't want to retire to the villages. They want to stay in their local
No.
community. Yeah. And I've been there, so I've been there and I understand that reaction. So I think like being 50, 55, 60 in 2021 is very different from being 55 or 60 in 1980. And we still have these brands that are defining what retirement is that are 30 or 40 years old. So what we get excited about is 2 things. One is like building a modern brand for what retirement really looks like today. The second thing is really powering it with data. So I would tell you that most of those companies that I've just mentioned, the only piece of data they have about you is your mailing address and your date of birth. There's not a lot I can do to create a solid financial plan with that information. We, however, have over 3,000 data points. Some of the data you've given us, some of the data that we've amassed to help build this retirement score. And so as we think about using data to help personalize what that outcome looks like for the customer, that when I think about modern becomes really important. And the legs of the stool for us on membership are, how do we help you personalize your scores? We've got a series of premium calculators around Social Security, Medicare, moving. We have our retirement school, which is really intended to empower you to make these key decisions. And then finally, we have a series of partners in our retirement store, which are the products and services our customers are going to need in this next phase of life. And giving them access to these partners and discounts, I really think will help them save money over time, but also get access to really good quality products.
So I believe ARP was really powered by the magazine. Do you think is an app the new magazine, or is it something fast forward 2 or 3 years from now is what's next?
So what I've said, so this consumer is online. We have done almost all of our acquisition digitally. They spend a lot of time online, and they spend their time in very different places from where millennials are. And so you just have to, first of all, like get yourself in they're obviously not on TikTok and Snapchat, they're on Facebook as an example. And there are many more examples that kind of just think about like where this consumer is. But what I would say is like what the consumer is doing is they're doing a lot, again, back to this research comment, they're doing a lot of research. And so what hasn't changed is their desire to read and digest content. But I think the format is different. And that for us, like when we launched the app, what we knew was this consumer wanted to spend a lot of time with us and they wanted a place to keep coming back to. And so as we thought about like, what's the right ecosystem, that place, when we get back into a world where if you're living in a city, you're on public transportation where you have like, 15 minutes, you can listen to a podcast, you can, read a quick article, like what is that format? And it's really, people are looking at their phones. And so that is for us, like embedding ourselves in the behavior that this customer already exhibits.
So you talk about the customer and their desire and their love for essentially research and to have that knowledge going in. What would you say are some of the biggest surprises for baby boomers as they embark on retirement?
The biggest surprise is the cost of healthcare. Many of them come into it most of them come into retirement having come off of a employer plan that was predominantly either fully paying or paying a significant amount of their healthcare costs. And when they see that they're going to start spending $750 or $1,000 a month to get a fully loaded plan, including a supplemental plan, that's a shock. And when you add that up, over 20 or 30 years for a couple, you start talking about this like $300,000 number on healthcare. I think where the industry has let them down is that today, most of the financial services industry is really uncomfortable talking about healthcare. It's like health is a health issue, but when a health issue costs you $300,000 for certain, so that's not even counting in long-term care. So when there is like a 95% chance that you're going to spend $300,000 on something in retirement, like I would call that a financial issue. And I think the challenge is for the consumer is that there's not a lot of integration between health and wealth. And so that's where, like for us in our premium membership, consumers have the ability to basically build up a Medicare plan and add that into their budget. If they're thinking about moving to Florida, they can see what the plan costs in Florida versus what the plan costs in New York. They can just say, look, I'm actually really healthy, but my husband isn't. So like, I want a fully loaded plan for my husband, but I'm going to roll the dice on myself. So you can really start to personalize that. And what you see is that because of how expensive those costs are, that has a significant impact on, how long your savings are going to last in retirement. So I think that's a place where the consumer feels let down. It's also a place where the Medicare sales industry is so focused on selling the plan that the consumer is having a hard time actually getting access to the education and the numbers that they want at the age they want it.
No, it's a challenging market. Back to your earlier point on expenses in retirement, I think the industry as a whole have, we filled, brochures. Yeah, what are those? All the brochures were pictures of boats, vacation homes, et cetera. Really, pictures should have been your doctor, your primary care physician, because that is, as you mentioned, Rhian, that's a big number to cover the minute you stop working. People just don't realize. So I think you're spot on that point. Also, Medicare and Medicaid, it's just such a complicated, highly regulated industry. And there are a lot of restrictions, honestly, in putting material together that actually speaks in simple terms. I mean, we're literally, as we're rolling out our own Medicare supplement product, man, just how hard is it to get a simple brochure out that agents can give to clients, right? I think Frank's on maybe state variant number 14 at this point, Laura. Mm-hmm. And if it's that hard, like, what does it really take to create simple stuff for you and that people can, absorb at scale? So it's not so I think it's a challenge we all face.
So one of the things that we had a customer a few weeks ago say to us, like, I'm really overwhelmed by government speak.
Yes.
And like one of our core values at our company is how do we be human in a world that sees numbers? And so I really think about like we were just a week ago reviewing all the copy in the app ahead of our membership launch, and everything we were doing was really trying to figure out like, how do we actually not make it sound legal? Because actually our consumer, if they read something that sounds like it's legal-esque, the warning signs go off, they can't trust it. And I don't think that's what any of us intend to do when we write things with like a legal tone, but that's the consumer reaction. And so if the consumer doesn't trust the words that we're writing, that's a problem. So, I mean, the choice of words and that ability to help the consumer make these decisions, I think is extraordinarily important. And it may be like for us, we've created an education system that's completely separate from any products. And I think that may be actually how we can, as like an industry, accomplish the goal, which is go to retirement school, learn everything you need to know about Medicare. We're not going to have product sales in there. But when you're ready for product sales, and as a product you want to buy, you want to enroll in Medicare supplement, then you can go to our retirement store and you can see our partners there. But I think sometimes we mix education with lead gen. And when we do that, you get yourself fully pulled into the regulated space. The customer stops trusting because they know you're just trying to sell a product. And so I am super intrigued around a concept of like, how can you create content that's truly a product, that it's not lead gen? And that when you see the earliest portions of retirement school in the Silvur app, you'll start to see, oh, like that actually looks like a standalone product. Like that is really content that's there truly to educate, that isn't trying to like put ads into the experience.
Yeah, well, our research and experience just totally confirms that, Rhian. We went out and surveyed a number of near retires and retires and said, how do you want to learn about, how do you want to understand and learn more about retirement planning, retirement issues? Online courses came up, way at the top, and we actually did. We've got a platform for online courses, and it's not lead gen. But it's very. Think of it as an educational manual. Most of these courses are very detailed educational manuals around how the products actually work. So a lot more legal speak than I would want in it, but we're not trying to sell you the product as you go, and we're helping you go feature by feature at your own pace to learn this. It's been remarkably successful. I think it's been, I would say, without much advertising at all, we've had really good registrations. Now we'll see where that leads. What goodwill does it engender, and can it turn into a lead at a later point? But I'm with you.
But I think it goes to this acceptance that this consumer is going to do a lot of research on their own. And so we actually get asked a lot, like, do your customers have financial advisors? And I don't know. And I'm not trying to replace a financial advisor. What I know is that our customers come to us with some sort of mental model. They may actually have a plan, a formal plan with a financial planner. They might have just interacted with a calculator on their company's 401k platform, or they just had like some idea and they're coming to us to like validate the plan and to do more research. And I think we all have to get comfortable that we're going to be in this world that customers are going to do research themselves, and then they're going to eventually make product choices. And sometimes as they make product choices, it'll be with a human, and sometimes it won't. But it is very rare that the first conversation is with someone who's going to sell them a product. This customer, we have found, at least our customers, are very savvy. They are, and I would say it in the world of, it's like street savviness. If you're 58 years old, you've been buying financial products for over 30 years. So you've bought some bad financial product, or you've had a friend that lost money, and you know how important these decisions are. And so you are going to do your own research. You are not going to trust the first person you run into on the street.
Yeah, no, we find that all the time, especially through our online chat on our website. Is we'll see agent meets with customer comes to website, customer does intense amount of research, wants to talk to us before they talk to them, or even more complicated spouse comes in, does the research, and it's not. There's just not a straight line here, and I think people want to make these decisions on their own terms. Can't push them.
No, and we say meet our customers where they are, right?
Yeah.
That's true. So you talked a little bit about partnerships in and out here, and yourself, as a startup. How can startups and incumbents work together to restore this sense of retirement security, if you will?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's very kind of obvious to me about retirement is that it covers lots of different industries. So even when I think about the software that we've built this retirement score that takes into account your 401k, your pension, any annuity income that you have. We then factor in Social Security and Medicare. So now we've crossed like broker-dealer land and 401k land and insurance land and government benefits. And so we know that actually to put that whole picture together, that you have to have not only a lot of data sources, but ultimately the customer is going to need lots of partners to actually execute. And so what I get really excited about with the platform we're building at Silvur and with membership is that it gives us an opportunity to basically be that glue in the center that pulls the pieces together for the consumer, so that the consumer, as they're making their decisions, they now have partners that they can access through the platform to help them make decisions. And I think the reality is that there is no one like magic solution out there. Even recently, I've been really excited about some of the work that's being done around income in retirement plans, and it's moving so much in the right direction, but it's still only a piece of the puzzle, because you still have to take into account, what the Social Security benefit looks like and what does their non-plan assets look like. And I think we just have to keep remembering that we're all a piece of the puzzle. And what we have to, like, we're trying to, at Silvur, we're trying to be that GP for the customer. There are lots of specialists, but right now the consumer is acting as the GP. Our hope is that the platform at Silvur really empowers the consumer to feel confident to actually make these decisions. But in this post-pension world, like, there's a lot of different parties at the table. And I think we all have to recognize that there is no one solution. Like, there is no one magic product out there that solves everything. That used to be the pension, right? Until we have a new product that everything fits into, what we see is that a platform like Silvur actually helps pull it all together for the customer. It also means that, unlike prior generations, the retirement plan is more important than ever. So in the old days, when you just had a pension, like, you didn't need a full-on plan. Now, when you have money in lots of different places and you've got lots of decisions you've got to make yourself, and you've got expenses that are coming and going, that retirement plan becomes extremely important. And the thing that we get really excited about, particularly with it being digital, is that we see the plan as like a living, breathing, I want to call it document, but it's online. So an online document. It's not a one-time job. This customer's life, you look at this past year as a perfect example. A lot of things changed, right? People lost their jobs, their healthcare expenses changed, they moved. All of that changes your retirement plan. And so I think, like, when I think about the future, like, the future needs to be centered around that plan and making sure that we have a place that all the pieces come together. And I think as an industry, we can do that together, to really help that customer.
Well, that's great. So I think this is great. You're going to a subscription model. How do you know now? It's a big pivot, right? To change from one revenue model to another. How do you know when you've got it right? Is it subscriptions? Is it conversions? And what's the signal that tells you you've got the model that's working?
So for us, it's about listening to our customer. And what our customer kept saying to us is they wanted to spend more time with us, and they wanted to go deeper and deeper on personalizing their plan. And that's what membership does. So for $7 a month, our customers get to personalize their plan. They get to get access to the retirement schools. They can get really smart and confident about the decisions they're making. And then they get access to all these discounts through partners. That for us, again, I go back to this behavior of, this is a long researched process. And what we really like about membership is that it aligns our goals as a company with our customer's goal, which is like, how do I get smarter? How do I get more confident? And how do I have a partner who will be with me over time? Like, that's what membership is.
I love it.
So I love to ask this question as we're wrapping up towards the end of our conversation, but it's obvious you have a passion for this and you have experience across multiple facets, but what is your why? So what is your personal why when you wake up in the morning? This is why you're doing this kind of work.
For me, it's all about our customers. I, on Friday, was speaking to one of our women customers who was sharing a sad but frankly common story in America, which is about how Social Security has really failed this generation of women. And she was talking about how, like many families, and you're seeing this, happening with COVID today, she had taken time out of the workforce to raise her kids. And then, so if she was out of the workforce, she didn't get any Social Security credits. And then she and her spouse got divorced in their 50s. And she realized after the divorce proceedings were completed that even though they had made a lot of joint decisions as a family, that actually their Social Security benefits calculations were independent. And it turns out that because of the way the rules are written, for an individual like herself who had taken a lot of time out of the workforce to raise her family, after divorce, her husband's divorce benefit, or her husband's ex-husband's Social Security benefits were twice as high as what her Social Security benefits would be. And it was just this woman is like really articulate. She went back to work when she got divorced, or trained herself, and has done everything right, but our system is really failing her because her calculations are based on these 1935 rules. And so here I am speaking to this woman, and not only do I want to have more conversations with Social Security around how we can modernize caregiving credits and how divorce benefits are calculated, but I want to help this woman, get a new job and help her get that part-time income. And so for me, it's so much more than just the math. The math is the beginning, but there are these stories. And when I say this was like a sad but common, like we have, as an example, a lot of women who reach out to us about the fact that they have taken time out of the workforce to care for family, and how they don't realize until it's too late how that has penalized them with regards to retirement security. And I think that's the reality. And I think we at Silvur have this opportunity to both get them back on the path to financial security, but also hopefully change the narrative in Washington around, well, what does retirement security look like? And in 2021, we can't be giving Social Security benefits out based on 1935 rules.
Absolutely.
That's great. Listen, Rhi, thanks so much for coming on, and congratulations on the launch of your subscription service. Now, I guess it's the same. I assume it's the same app, right? Correct. If I want to subscribe.
You can go. So it's iOS app. So you can go, if you have an iPhone, go to the App Store. You can download it. You can get a free retirement score to start, and then for $7 a month, you can upgrade to membership, get access to the calculators, to retirement school. It's that time of year where we start thinking about Mother's Days and Father's Day gifts. So if you're not at 50 to 70, but you have a loved one in your family who is 50 to 70, think about getting them a subscription for the holidays. That's
great. Laura, any other questions? Can you think of, Rhian?
What's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
So for me personally, it's Rhian, it's Rhian at kinder, kindur.com. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can also reach out to the company through our website.
That's great. Yeah, well, thank you. Listen, I do have the app on my phone, and listen, I may be one of your first customers.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Great. Hey, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. Give us feedback and send any questions our way. Look forward to talking to you again next week on the Reimagine podcast.